Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Frank Rose. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting Unleash Your Story. I'm so grateful to have you here today. We're going to talk about your latest book, The Sea We Swim In, How Stories Work in a Data-Driven World. We don't realize how important stories make up our lives and frame the way we think and see the world. But you're going to share more of those details with our audience. First, just share a little bit about your background so everyone can get an idea of how you came to where you are today.
Sure. Okay. First off, thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, you
And
betcha, Frank.
okay, I basically my background is as a journalist. I came to New York right after college. I grew up and went to school in Virginia. I came to New York and started writing first for the Village Voice, and then Rolling Stone, and then Esquire. I did a couple of books along the way, and by the late 90s, I was writing for Fortune, and then right at the end of the 90s, I joined Wired, and I was a contributing editor there for 10 years. And essentially what happened was my beat at Wired, so to speak, was stories at the intersection of media and technology. And at a certain point, toward the end of the aughts, I realized that the way people were telling stories was changing and changing in response to digital technology. And that led me to essentially leave the magazine and start work on my book, The Art of Immersion, which came out in 2011.
Wow. That's amazing to me. Now, and then The Sea We Swim In, is that your latest book? Has it hit the market yet?
Yes, it's out now.
Mhm.
It's after The Art of Immersion came out,
Mhm.
I joined the staff at Columbia and the Columbia Digital Storytelling Lab. I started an awards program there for digital storytelling. I also started an executive education program that's presented by Columbia University School of the Arts in partnership with Columbia Business School. The program is called Strategic Storytelling. It's about, essentially how to tell stories that really matter, that are
Mhm.
sort of key to identifying you or your organization or
Mhm.
your purpose. And the at a certain point, I started developing a toolkit for the book, and then I realized, you know what, I should expand the toolkit into a book. That's The Sea We Swim In.
Wow. And so what have you noticed? Because you've been in this whole arena and you've seen the evolution of narrative and stories and how it comes across and is used in our everyday life. How has things changed and social media hit the horizons?
Well, social media is certainly a big part of it, but it's not the only part.
Hmm.
What happened with the that led to the art of immersion was, uh, uh, well, I'll tell you a little story. There was a interview that I did with James Cameron in 2006, and that's what really set me off in this direction. He was in Montreal on a soundstage where someone else was directing the first feature film to be made using the stereoscopic camera, the 3D camera that he had invented. And so he didn't have a lot to do, is the truth. And so that was perfect for me. I got a lot of time with him. And at a certain point, I asked him about Avatar. Avatar was widely expected to be his next film, but it had not yet been greenlit. It had been in development for at least 10 years. And so I asked him about it. He didn't want to really go into any details, of course. What he did say was that it was a sort of an Edgar Rice Burroughs style action adventure film that takes place on another planet. And he went on to say this, which really changed my whole way of thinking, which is he said the best way for him, the best way to tell such a story is uh, to create almost like a fractal experience. So if you're a casual fan, you can just watch the movie and that's fine. But if you're a more committed fan, you can go in deeper and deeper, and almost like in powers of 10, and the pattern will still hold.
Mhm.
And what I realized, gradually over the next few months and couple of years was that this was really the key to a whole new form of storytelling that was emerging in response to digital. Social media is part of it, but there's lots of other stuff that's involved as well.
So I loved that movie Avatar. So was it more about making it experiential and bringing people in to participate with the movie to make it more like they're part of the experience?
That's a very big part of it. Yes,
Mhm.
that around that time developed this phenomenon called alternate reality games, where people sort of created an experience around a movie, typically, but sometimes it could be a video game like Halo. Um, and the idea was to sort of create this fiction around the story, and a fiction that the audience would have to help decipher and have to decipher together communally online. And this was sort of became a pretty big phenomenon for several years, and I think really set the stage for what's happening now, which is kind of an alternate version of that.
Mhm.
But it was the idea was you were sort of pretending that the story was real, and all these clues and so forth were being dropped, and online clues, puzzles, all kinds of things. And uh, the audience, the online audience, would work together to solve all these problems
Mhm.
and figure out what the story is. And in the process, they would get involved. They would,
Mhm.
and in some cases, even physically, there were like physical events that happened,
Mhm.
that were part of the movie
Mhm.
scenario, part of the alternate reality game. Ultimately, I realized that there was a precedent for this. It was the fan clubs of Sherlock Holmes.
Mhm.
Back in the 30s, they and still today, they persist in the fiction, sort of a wink, wink, that the Sherlock Holmes stories were real, that Arthur Conan Doyle was not the author; he was just the agent, uh, and uh, uh, this sort of elaborate, very elaborate fiction that's created around the
Mhm.
fiction.
Wow. This is interesting. I wonder where this will go. Now, we heard recently Mark Zuckerberg talk about metaverse, and I'm wondering, where do you see all of this going in the near future with the way we tell stories and what you've talked about a little bit? Is this going to kind of expand into what you've just mentioned, where we're going to kind of be living inside of these alternate realities?
Well, in a way, I think it already has, and to some extent, they're fun and they can be enjoyable. At the same time, what is QAnon if not an alternate reality? And it's an alternate reality that people actually believe in, and large numbers of people, no matter how outrageous and absurd it might seem. And so yeah, I think that is what's happening, and I think there's a kind of a distancing from, or a separation from reality that seems to be going on in the culture at large, that is not always great.
Mhm.
But as a fan phenomenon, as something that accompanies a movie
Mhm.
or a video game or something like that, it's certainly, obviously it's fine. Um, I think the metaverse, it's going to be quite a while before we have a real functioning metaverse.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of technology that has not been
Mhm.
invented yet, Mark Zuckerberg notwithstanding.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think that if frankly, Zuckerberg doesn't have a terribly good track record with Facebook, and if he thinks that he can, sort of do a bait and switch and convert Facebook into a sort of corporate metaverse, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, I personally like being in reality. There are some funs to being inside of a video game. The first thing that came to mind was The Matrix, and while
Right.
it might be fun to do I'd love to go to Avatar and be inside that movie, but everyday life, I'd like to actually be at a real desk, not inside of a computer. But where do you see the future of narrative, and how can businesses use narrative effectively to push their business or a new product or just kind of reach their target audiences?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that it really has a lot to do with understanding um, if you're a storyteller, if you're a business that is, if you have a business that is, in the process of telling stories, uh, you have to understand who you are, who your audience is, and where you want to take them. In the strategic storytelling program and also in the Sea We Swim In, I lay out what I consider the 9 key elements of story. And the first three are the most basic, the most central, and that's the author, the audience, and the journey. And any story is basically, an author taking his or her audience on some sort of journey. It starts in one place at one time and ends in another place at another time. And along the way, things happen, the conflicts erupt, and so forth. And eventually, you have some sort of resolution. Now, that's just sort of the basic idea of the narrative arc, essentially, which is, has been at work in film and theater and so forth for, in the case of theater, for hundreds of, if not thousands of years. The But if you are a business, I think that a couple of things are important. One is you need to understand that certain stories are going to be, really key to your identity, to how people view you. And it's sort of become a truism in marketing today that in the digital age, you don't control your image, you don't control, what people think of you. The It's really, the consumer who does that. It's your consumers, and with stories, that's sort of true. But that is to say, stories are, I think, the best way, the most efficient and effective way to, sort of get
Mhm.
your, get people to, sort of in line with what you would like to be, how you would like to be seen, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well, I think one good way to keep your audience seen in the way you'd like them to see you and your business is to offer the most awesomest customer service, like to really put front
Right.
of mind what does my customer wants and needs and desires, and really put that out there and the best possible product. And when they talk you up, I mean, it can only be good stuff. And but one thing I've noticed, and tell me if you've seen this, Frank, is that people have a business and they'll say, well, I have my personal Facebook page, and they'll post things that aren't really matching with their business brand, but they're like, that's different. It's my personal page and my personal Twitter. But I tell people anything and everything that's digitized stays there in the digital universe forever. You can't make it go away. So you really have to be careful because your customers can see some of your personal stuff and it can come up and tarnish your actual reputation or your business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's very true. One of the ideas that I develop in the book, in the Sea We Swim In, is the idea of a narrative platform. And the point there is really that everything you do and everything you say, um, especially on social media, but elsewhere, including in in real life, is part of your story, and whether you intend for it to be or not. And you need to think of this as essentially a platform, a way to connect your fans, your customers, whoever you have. And in an ideal world, your customers are your fans. to connect them not just with you and your company and your products, but with each other in many cases as well. Because that's, I think, one of the things that we learned from alternate reality games back 10 or 12 years ago, that people want to share things with one another, and they want to be together. And if you can sort of create a positive environment where people can do that, build it around your brand, then I think that's a very promising thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This recalls for me a recent documentary I heard, the story of Tupperware. And I forgot her name, but there was a woman who actually launched, she was a sales marketing genius. And what she ended up doing for Tupperware is bringing into the idea of community, bringing women together and their friends to have these Tupperware parties. That had never been done before, but it was a genius marketing idea because it brought community together. People were interacting with each other. It made Tupperware explode, whereas beforehand they weren't super exploding. But it's something to think about with your business. If you can find a way to bring that community you talk about in some fashion and bring your audience together, it kind of cements this kind of family community that will get everyone loving your product.
Exactly, and that's a great example. Another example one that I use in the book is Warby Parker, the eyeglasses, online, and now they have stores as well. But when they were getting started, and it was about 10 years ago when they launched. Uh, they didn't have money for ads or anything like that, so they decided that they would get an old school bus and rip out the inside of it and sort of reimagine it, reconstruct it as a sort of combination library and eyeglasses store on wheels. And they sent this bus across the country. It was called the Warby Parker Class Trip. And they had a blog that where they wrote stories and posted lots of photographs of experiences they had in each town they stopped at along the way. Nashville, Dallas, the West Coast. They went all over the place, and wherever they went, they sort of connected with people who were fans of the brand. People who had bought glasses from them before, and so it created this. First off, it was something much more valuable, I think, than advertising, and it created this bond between, it sort of created the idea of a Warby Parker type person, and people could really identify with that. And I think that was very early on in their existence. Now they're hugely successful. That was one of the things that got them established.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And the person I'm talking about, the lady that helped launch Tupperware into the stratosphere, was Brownie Weiss. If anyone wants to check out her documentary, fascinating story. It might get people thinking about how they can actually do what you're talking about, actually build that social community with their audience. We could go on for hours. I know we could, but I don't want us to leave without everyone finding out how they can get a copy of your books and find out more about you, Frank. How can they do that?
Thank you. Well, the both books are available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or local bookstores. So they're widely available. The Sea We Swim In, and the older one is The Art of Immersion. It's available in paperback, and they're both available as audiobooks as well.
Awesome.
So wherever books are sold.
And do you have a specific website they can
Yes,
contact you at? Okay.
absolutely. Frankrose.com
Awesome.
is where you'll find me. There's a contact page. I'm happy to hear from anybody. And there's also there's pages there about the book. You can learn more about the books and other things that I did.
Awesome. Awesome. And it's right there, everyone. Check down below, right beneath. And thank you so much, Frank Rose, for coming today to Savvy's Unleash Your Story and sharing your great wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.